talk about the 2020 Polaris RZR Pro XP 2-seat. Now I've had this machine a little over 6 months, so I've had plenty of time to evaluate this machine, make the changes on it that I prefer. Guys, keep in mind, these are my opinions. You're welcome to borrow them, but you don't have to agree with them. I really do like this machine. I've had every RZR that Polaris has ever made, and this by far has been the best machine they have built overall. Now granted, I'll always go back to the original RZR S and say it was probably the most reliable RZR. But we are getting into high horsepower machines. This machine comes with 181 turbocharged horsepower, which is a great increase in the previous year's model with 168 horsepower. But man, I've really enjoyed this machine, and you guys that have followed me have seen that I've had this machine in Glamis, I've had it in Johnson Valley, I've had it in Ocotillo Wells, I took it to Calico on Easter, I've had it in Utah, I've had it at Windrock in Tennessee. Here in Alabama, I've been to Hawk Pride and as well as Stony Lonesome OHV. So I've really got to take this machine in just about every type of terrain with the exception of mud, because I hate mud. I'm not gonna put this machine in a mud hole to see how it does. I know you guys in the deep South, in Louisiana, South Mississippi, Texas, you guys love the mud holes. I'll leave that for you. That's not my type of riding. What I prefer is mainly technical rock crawling. So one of the reasons why I really love Johnson Valley, I love Moab, although I did not get to take this machine to Moab and wanted to, should have been there this month, but because of the virus and the shutdown of America, they postponed Rally on the Rock. So won't get to take this machine to Moab, as I'm working on the 4-seat now, and that's what we're gonna be taking in September to Moab. But overall, this machine has been great. There are good things and bad things, and I wanna address all of them, good and bad. This redesigned machine comes with a one-piece frame. You can feel that, especially in high speed, the rigidity of the frame. That is a plus unless you crash it. So if you were to crash it, damage the frame, the two-piece frame was a better way to go. I've seen a couple of guys that have crashed these, and you can't buy just the front portion of the frame. Now you have to pull the whole machine apart and replace the whole frame. So, you know, that's give or take. That's kind of on the extreme side, but it is longer, 6 inches longer in wheelbase, and most of that all interprets into the cab. The cockpit of this thing is massive compared to previous model RZRs. I'm 6'1", plenty of room for me. You know, I really couldn't see anybody up to 6'5" having any kind of issue squeezing in one of these machines. I know the look of this machine, it was kind of controversial when it came out. Some guys liked it, some guys hated it. I see more and more people buying them. It's really beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I love this machine, especially when it's fully built. I've seen a few guys that have built aftermarket roll cages and really dressed them up nice. But I actually have, you know, left the factory roll cage on this. It's probably the best roll cage that I've ever seen an OEM manufacturer put on their machine. This is the ultimate version. And so it does come with the Fox Live Valve, the dynamic system. This is Dynamics 2.0. The major difference in there is they made a few fine tuning adjustments, mainly in the softer settings. This one is a smoother, softer riding machine than the previous Dynamics models, the Turbo S or just the Turbo Dynamics. This one actually is a little softer, where the previous Dynamics models, if you put it on firm, it was all the way on 10. This does not start at 10 in firm. It does have the oh shit button on the steering wheel if you need to go to 10. If you have that one moment where you see a ledge coming up or a witch eye, you know, you're gonna drop out, you can hit that oh shit button and it firms it up, and it really does nicely. Now I will say on this machine, although this machine rides great from the showroom floor, just like every other model machine I've ever driven, the spring rates are off. And especially on this machine, Polaris claims it has 14.5 inches of ground clearance. You're not gonna get 14.5 inches of ground clearance off of this machine without changing the springs. Brand new, you can turn the springs, tighten the springs up and get 14.5, but after you put a couple hundred miles on it, you're gonna be more like 12.5. This machine is equipped with shock therapy springs on it, and I do have 33-inch tires, so I'm actually at 16.5 inches of ground clearance on this machine, and it made it really nice. It was one of the gripes I had on it when I took it to Johnson Valley. I kept bottoming out in the rocks and bashing the skid pan, and called shock therapy, and Justin sent me a new set of springs. And not only did it give me the proper ride height, it also, man, it just greatly improved the ride of this machine. One of the other things I want to talk about is, you can see on here, I got a lot of Polaris accessories, pure Polaris accessories. I will say they have stepped it up in the quality of their accessories. I've got the vented windshield, the aluminum roof. I have their back glass. Some people don't like the curvature of it, but I put that in there in case I wanted to upgrade to the rear speakers, which I never did. I've got the Polaris lock and ride cooler in the back, the North Star cooler, as well as a dry box, and front and rear bumpers from Polaris, the 6,000-pound winch from Polaris, and of course the door inserts from Polaris. While I talk about that, I'm gonna go back to the rear speakers. The ultimate model of the Pro XP actually comes with a Rockford system in it to work with your ride command. It's not a great sounding system. If you're going to be under throttle on this thing, or really doing over 30 miles an hour, you got to turn this thing all the way up. To be able to hear it sitting around, it's fine. And it is nice to have a factory installed stereo system in this machine, but I do wish it was a little bit louder. The steering wheel on this thing, it has all the controls that's going to control your stereo as well as your suspension. One of the things I looked at that when I first saw this machine back in July of last year is I'm not going to be able to upgrade the steering wheel, but you really don't need to. This steering wheel is extremely comfortable in my hands. It's fat the way I like it. It's the right size. It's not too big, not too small. And so there was no need. I was really pleased with the steering wheel on this machine. Now, one thing this machine did come with in the premium and the ultimate models is not only do you have tilt steering, you also have telescopic steering. So you're able to get that steering wheel, you know, right where you want it. You can move it up and down and pull it a little closer to you, which I like to get my elbows at about a 90-degree angle, so I can do that with this machine. The ultimate model does come with Click 6 harnesses. Man, I can give or take the Click 6 harnesses. They're really convenient getting in and out of the machine. They're much safer than a 3-point harness, and still even better than the Sub-Zero harnesses that come in the premium package of the Pro XP, but still not a fan of a retractable harness. Again, my opinion, I prefer just a good 5-point harness, non-sewn, keep your shoulders come completely off your lap. Just my personal preference. The seats in this machine are by far the best riding, most comfortable seats that Polaris has ever put in a RZR. There is a drawback though. They are composite seats, and I have seen a few guys that have broke that seat. The new seat latch system is supposed to keep you from doing a little bit of the wobbling, where the older 3-point system, the way the seat's latched in. However, on this one, I have already broken one of the little hooks that hold the seat in. Cheap part, ordered it, no big deal to replace it, but it is one of my gripes. And the other one is, keep those hooks oiled. If you've got a Pro XP, the best thing I can say, every time you clean this machine, pull that seat out, oil those little plastic hooks, because if you don't, just the slightest little bit of dirt and grime will make it hard to get those hooks to release, and it is a nightmare to get your seats to unlatch if those hooks don't unlatch. All right, let's talk about the tires. You can see the tires and wheels I have already changed out. That was one of the first things I did to this machine. This machine comes standard with 30-inch Maxxis Carnivores, which was a really popular tire, especially in 2019. Everybody was wanting Carnivores. I was never really a big fan of them. Not a bad tire, just didn't suit my needs for East Coast rock crawling. It seemed like they just really didn't grip good on wet rock. And I really like the MRT tires. These are a set of the 33 MRT Rockies in a sticky compound. Don't advise a sticky compound if you're looking for a set of tires to go 2,000 miles. a sticky compound tire is not going to make it to 2,000 miles, and I didn't expect these to. I want my tires to grip as good as possible on rock, whether it be wet or a sandy rock like Moab or Johnson Valley, King of the Hammers. So that's why I went with these, and I love the 33. It just seems to give me just the right amount of ground clearance. In other machines I've had 32s and I've had 35s as well, but I really like these 33-inch Rockies. This does come with a full skid plate. One of the first times I've ever seen Polaris make a machine and have full coverage from front to back. It doesn't just cover the drivetrain. So that was a huge plus. You know, for the off-roader, for the avid off-roader, and it's great for probably 98% of RZR owners. Now me, you know, I'm not the 1%er that's just beating the crap out of my machine, but I will say I'm in the 5%, or you know, I'm a little harder on my machine. It's not necessarily a trail machine. I do like to do some rock crawling, and although the skid pan itself is not damaged, it's only about 1/4 of an inch thick, the cross members on this machine are easily bent. So best advice, if you're going to rock crawl, going to bash on rocks, get a quality 3/8 to 1/2 inch UHMW skid plate. Me personally, I prefer factory UTV. The other thing on this, the first time I ever took this out rock crawling was at Hawk Pride, and was going over something relatively simple, and the front axle snapped. And was really surprised at that. These axles originally were advertised as 8 times stronger, and then they were last 8 times longer, and I really broke it on something that it shouldn't have broke on. So I reached out to RCV, which is what I run in all of my rigs, and they didn't have axles ready for the Pro XP yet, but luckily enough they were looking for a Pro XP, so I loaned them mine and actually have the first set of RCV axles. These are actually prototype axles that were in this machine, and really set my mind at ease about not having to worry about breaking an axle, because right now on the aftermarket side, there's not many companies that are making stronger axles for this machine, and sometimes can be a pain if you're out on a trail and you break an axle. These machines are relatively new, so finding a buddy that may have a spare axle is kind of tough to find. So I was really happy to get RCV axles in it. The other thing is, and I want to actually show you this, the suspension on this machine is great. And I'm talking about the control arms. Now you can see on this machine, this does not have factory control arms, and I'm going to show you why. So I'm going to grab the front arms. Now the upper arm on the Pro XP, just like the Turbo S, man, it's pure beef. I can't see really bending this except for in a hard crash. But the lower arm, man, it's like pencil thin. Not a fan of this lower arm. Would have liked to have seen it if it were beefy like the upper or like the lower Turbo S. Probably would still be running them. So, you know, I was a little scared of that. So right after I got this machine, I had already ordered a spare set of lower arms because I didn't want to go without until I got some HCR arms. I really like HCR boxed A-arms. They didn't have a kit for this at 64 inches. And I didn't want to go to 72 because I do primarily ride on the East Coast and I like to keep it narrow. So I went to HCR and Brandon used my machine, put the first set on here. I just absolutely love those A-arms and the trailing arms. They take a lot of abuse on the rocks and haven't let me down yet. Now the other thing is too, is like the radius rods. The radius rods, again, let me grab some parts. The upper radius rod, when these first came out, I did a little review after I went riding and didn't call this arched, I called it pre-bent, this upper, or excuse me, this lower. But man, this is beef. I mean, this actually has a lot of rock rash on it. They're pretty stout. So I was really impressed after driving it with these, that these will hold up. But again, here we go to the upper. Just pencil thin. Would have liked to have seen them match the upper to the lower. And I realize that manufacturers try to keep the weight down. That may be part of it. But what I ended up doing was calling Ricky over at L&W Fab and got me some billet aluminum radius rods, upper and lower. Really like billet aluminum. They tend to flex more than bend. Not saying they can't bend, but they're less likely to bend than steel radius rods. And the L&Ws have not let me down yet, and I have really beat the crap out of those radius rods. They've got some pretty big gouges in them from Johnson Valley. If you're looking at getting a new RZR, and I said this before, my initial thoughts after driving this machine again back in July, if you already own a Turbo S, I wouldn't say sell your Turbo S, trade in your Turbo S to get a Pro XP. But if you're looking at getting a new RZR, this is the one that I would get. And they do have this in you know, a standard model, a premium model, as well as the Ultimate. If you can swing it, get the Ultimate. The ride command, the Rockford system, the tilting and telescoping steering wheel, and the dynamic system on this thing, it's just worth the extra money. It's night and day difference, especially if you drive in different terrains. If you don't ride the same trail system, or you're not just leaf looking, if you are a little bit harder on the machine than you think that your buddies are, the dynamic system is leaps and bounds above any suspension system that I have ever ridden in. And that says a lot, because I've raced a couple times, done some desert races, and like to set up my shocks for that. But this system is amazing. I saw, you know, Honda adopted it in their 4-seater, and haven't driven one of those yet, but I can't stress enough, I'd like to see every manufacturer come out with some type of live valve system on their machines. It is a game changer completely. Again, most of my riding is slower rock crawling, with a few exceptions of Johnson Valley, high speed, you know, Ocotillo Wells. I really haven't had much problems out of this, other than, like I said, I broke a front axle. You know, I think I've done that with almost every new machine that I've driven. It always seems to be the front. There were some clutch issues I saw some people having. I didn't really have clutch issues, other than my secondary needed to be shimmed a little bit because it was hard to shift, and that did eventually cause the shifter cable to fail, and I had to replace the shifter cable. Shim the secondary clutch, eliminated that. Would have liked to have seen that taken care of before it went out of the factory, but is what it is. I had to take a little 2-minute break there. Didn't realize the sun was starting to get into my camera, so sorry about that, guys. So let's talk about one of the things that seems to be a hot topic, is cab heat in this machine. I see some guys talking about that the cab heat is hotter than previous models. I haven't noticed that. The cab heat is hot. As like every other UTV I've driven, with the exception of the Kawasaki that has no cab heat in it. And it is excessive heat, but I can't tell the difference between this and my Turbo RZR, with the windshield full doors on it. I haven't put a thermometer in there to see how hot it gets, but just driving it around this summer or this spring, I haven't noticed any more heat than I have in my Turbo RZR with the windshield roof, full doors. The best thing I can advise you on that, if you don't like the heat, by all means, take the windshield off, and that'll help getting some wind over your face. I did put these door inserts on it. I didn't notice any difference in cab heat by putting that on. The main reason I did that was because mud just splashes on my leg, and that drives me nuts. Now, this machine does tend to get a little bit more spray off the tire coming right in this area here, right over the door, than previous models. And I think a lot of it has to do with this fender flare just isn't doing the coverage that it did on some of the other machines. I noticed that there are companies that make maybe some mud flaps. I know Polaris just came out with some extended fender flares that replace those. This doesn't have it on it, and the reason it doesn't is I would rather have mud on my leg than have the look of those mud flaps or extended fender flares. My personal preference. I just don't like the look of it. But so I end up with a muddy left leg if it's wet outside. But guys, this machine has handled, I want to say, almost flawlessly. It was a little bit of learning curve to go through with it being the longer wheelbase with the 6 inches, but it didn't take me long to overcome that wheelbase and get used to it. It's been an exceptional rock crawler. The thing just absolutely flies. I think my speedometer shows 83, 84, and it'll start hitting the limiter. Now on this machine, I did end up making a few changes. I did put the Trinity exhaust along with a Trinity tune on it, and then changed out the airbox intake tube. That is a problem with this machine. The airbox intake tube under hard throttle, when that turbo spools up, it's sucking it together. And this thing, you could actually hear it. It almost made like a whistling sound. And so I had that changed out and put a silicone and stainless steel airbox tube going to it. So that eliminated that problem. But this thing rips, and it does show 83, 84, and I think we were on GPS in the low to mid 90s in high. Now, one of the things I want to talk about, since the Turbo RZR first came out in 2016, when they announced the Turbo RZR, the low gearing in it was pretty decent. In 2017, they changed the gearing, where the low range in a Turbo RZR, man, you could do almost 45 miles an hour in stock form in low range. There's no reason for a low range to go that fast. So one of the things I did was I took this machine up to Hubert Rowland, a good buddy of mine, works with Nitro Circus. Some of you guys might know him as Nitro Redneck Hubert. And Hubert pulled the transmission out and put a new set of lower gears in it for me. A lot of guys on the internet you can find with that part, or locally, can change that out for you. I actually have my 4-seat Pro XP right now at Tapco, and they've done the same thing on it. By putting that lower gear set in it with these 33s, the belt doesn't squeal. It crawls great. I want to say maybe tops out at 30 to 35 now. Still a little too fast for me in low, but it crawls great, and I'm not having to change the belt out from smoking the belt rock crawling. All right, my final thoughts on the Pro XP is it is the best RZR that Polaris has ever made. You know, high horsepower, high speed, you know, God, I mean, it just rails in corners. I know a lot of guys are anticipating a 72-inch machine, but when everybody says that this thing handles like a 72, it's not a joke. It really does. This thing rails corners like a 72-inch machine with all of the upgrades, the one-piece frame, more room in the cockpit, better seats, the stereo system, telescoping wheel, the best cage that any manufacturer has ever put on a machine, beefed up suspension, live valve. Guys, if you're considering buying one of these machines, don't hesitate to go get one. I've been thoroughly impressed with this machine, and I'm going to say out of a 10, I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. Nothing's perfect. This is getting close. Glad to see the manufacturers up in the game a little bit, but not just with horsepower, but also quality. One of the things that Polaris owners used to, I would see say on the internet is, and hey, instead of let's get in crazy horsepower, why don't they start addressing some things on the machines that fail? And one of those things is the suspension, and they did that with beefier parts on the suspension. One of those was the frame. They did that with a one-piece frame. It's really, really, really a quality built machine. Is it perfect? No. Are you going to run into some issues? Yes. Don't know any manufacturer that makes a side-by-side that you're not going to have to make some tweaks and tunes on, maybe replace some parts with some beefier aftermarket parts. But this machine is, I want to say, it's the most capable, ready-to-race machine right out of the box that you could get from any manufacturer. All right, guys, that's it. That's my review, 6-month review of the Pro XP. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more videos like this, please like this video. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Make some comments below. Let me know your thoughts, good or bad. I can take it. I'm a big boy. But I appreciate each and every one of you watching. Y'all stay safe out on the trails, and have fun.